I knew the room had turned against me the second the laughter thinned. Sharp, quick, like someone pulled a thread too tight, and it finally snapped. It happened right between the clinking glasses and the fake compliments, right when everyone leaned together for a picture Evan said would blend the families. My name is Elaine Porter, and before I tell you anything else, just know this. Some betrayals are quiet until the moment they decide to speak. And mine chose Mother's Day. Evan stood at the center of the rented hall. He decorated with soft gold balloons and white tablecloths that didn't match the tension sitting beneath them. He held himself proud, shoulders back, smiling like a man introducing the world. He curated. Talia hovered close enough to guide him, with touches small enough to look affectionate, but firm enough to shape direction. "Let's get everyone together for the big picture," he called out. Cousins moved first, then aunts, then the people I didn't recognize until they mentioned knowing Victor from back in the day. I stepped forward, naturally, years of habit still moving my feet to my child before thought could catch up. I stood beside him, angled slightly the way mothers do without realizing. Evan didn't lean in. His body stayed rigid, breath tight. He kept glancing at Talia, searching her face as if she were giving him lines to remember. She leaned in barely and whispered something I wasn't meant to hear, but mothers have ears trained by instinct. Show them who your real family is. I saw it happen. The flicker, the fear, the hunger to impress her. The photographer, a cousin's teenage daughter, lifted her phone. "Mom," Evan said. His voice was steady, too steady. "Can you step aside? I want my real mother in this picture." The room froze so hard the silence cracked. Someone inhaled too sharply. A fork dropped and clattered against a plate. No one moved. No one blinked. Eyes flicked between us like they were watching the ground open. I didn't speak, didn't ask why, didn't remind him whose arms carried him through nights he couldn't sleep, whose hands filled out scholarship forms, whose spine bent so his world wouldn't crack. I stepped aside, not out of agreement, not out of weakness, but because clarity has a way of arriving exactly when humiliation thinks it's winning. Talia slipped into my place without hesitation, her smile soft and triumphant, the kind of smile that hides sharp edges under gloss. Evan let her hold his arm. He forced another smile for the camera. The flash went off. A moment captured. A bond severed. Victor hadn't even arrived yet. He would walk in 15 minutes later, smiling, unaware that the foundation of his son's life had already shifted. Patrice came to me quietly, sliding through the crowd with concern etched into her face. She touched my elbow gently. "Elaine, you don't deserve that. We've been watching how she talks to him. He's not seeing clearly." Her voice was the first kindness I felt all afternoon. It didn't soothe me, but it steadied me, anchored something that had started to drift. I stayed long enough to avoid making a scene, long enough to watch Evan laugh a little too loud, Talia guide him with little nudges, relatives pretending not to stare at me, long enough to understand that today wasn't random. It was a pattern finally choosing daylight. When I walked outside, the evening air felt colder than it should. Honest, in a way the room hadn't been. I drove home slowly, steady hands on the wheel, silence sitting beside me like an old companion. The house greeted me with stillness, not comfort, but clarity. I walked into my bedroom, opened the nightstand drawer, and pulled out the small locked box I hadn't touched in months. Its weight settled into my palm like truth. I unlocked it. The papers inside weren't sentimental. They weren't forgiving. They were waiting. I laid them out on the bed. One by one, the way a person lays out choices they can no longer avoid. And for the first time that day, I finally exhaled. Tomorrow, something would break. And I was done being the one who bent first. The night after the gathering, sleep wouldn't come. The house was too still, the kind of stillness that forces you to sit with memories you've been avoiding. I sat on the edge of my bed, the lamp throwing a soft circle of light across the floor. The documents I'd laid out earlier were now tucked back inside the box, but the weight of them stayed in the room with me. It's strange how humiliation can pull you backward before it pushes you forward. One moment, I was standing in that hall, watching my son choose another woman's hand over mine. The next, I was remembering how hard he clung to me the year everything in our home broke open. Evan was 14 the night his heart cracked for the first time. Not the heartbreak from girls or friends drifting apart, but the quieter kind, the kind children don't know how to name. The divorce was still fresh, sharp enough to change the air in the house. Victor had just moved out. His closet hung empty, his shoes gone, his scent fading from the hallway. Evan walked into my room, holding his blanket the way he used to when he was 6. His face was tight, jaw trembling like he was trying to keep his childhood from spilling out of him. "Mom," he whispered, standing in the doorway. "Can I sleep in here?" I shifted over without speaking. He climbed into the bed and lay stiff beside me, like he was trying to make himself small. I could feel him trying not to cry. I said nothing. Sometimes silence holds a child better than arms. Then the dam broke. He turned into me, face pressed against my shoulder, and sobbed so hard his whole body shook. Not loud tears, not tantrum tears. The silent kind, the ones you only let out when you think losing someone is possible. "I thought you were going to forget me," he choked out, like he did. I held his head in my hands, fingers smoothing the tightness in his curls. "I'm right here," I kept whispering. "I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere." He didn't believe it right away. I felt that truth in the way he held on. His fear wasn't about the divorce. It was about belonging, about whether he would be chosen when the world shifted. That fear didn't leave him as he grew. It just changed shape. Instead of crying into my shoulder, he started chasing approval like it was oxygen. Teachers, coaches, friends, anyone who made him feel seen became a lifeline. And I did what mothers do. I worked harder, watched him closer, stayed steady, so he wouldn't fall apart again. But some wounds don't heal when ignored. They simply wait for someone bold enough to use them. When Talia entered his life, she found that wound without even looking. She noticed things quickly, how Evan's eyes searched a room for validation, how he stiffened when corrected, how he glowed when someone praised him. She stepped into that space with practiced ease, offering attention just warm enough to feel maternal and just strategic enough to secure devotion. At first, it seemed harmless. She laughed at his jokes, bragged about his grades, told him he was special. But approval can become a leash in the wrong hands. And Talia held it lightly, like a woman testing weight before pulling. I didn't see the danger immediately. I was too busy rebuilding my life, too busy helping Evan navigate the ache of a father who didn't know how to explain absence. I thought any additional support was good for him. I thought kindness had one face. I learned otherwise the afternoon I arrived early to drop off a folder Evan had forgotten for a school presentation. Talia didn't know I was in the hallway. Her voice floated through the partially open kitchen door. Low, coaxing, coated with something sweet enough to sting. That's enough for now, she told him. Your mother means well, but she limits you. Stay close to the people who see your potential. I stopped breathing. Evan didn't respond. He just nodded, quiet, eager, needing. And in that moment, I saw the shift begin. The first thread loosening. The first crack since the night he cried at 14. Her sentence still sits in me, sharp and unmoved. Your mother limits you. I don't know why certain memories choose to surface when they do. Maybe pain has its own instinct, tapping you on the shoulder when it senses you're finally ready to look it in the eye. That night, after reliving Talia's voice slicing into my son's trust, another memory rose. The moment I realized she wasn't just inserting herself into his life. She was replacing me in small, precise strokes. Evan was 16, a difficult age, full of sharp corners and fragile pride. He'd been begging for a limited edition gaming console, expensive, unnecessary, the kind of thing that would have drained money meant for groceries and utility bills. I sat him down at the kitchen table, explained the budget, and tried to soften the no with a warm meal and time together. He said he understood, but his eyes dimmed the way they always did when the world told him, not yet. 3 days later, Victor called me from the driveway. I'm dropping Evan off, he said, voice uneasy. But can we talk for a minute? Before I could answer, Evan burst through the front door carrying a glossy shopping bag, his face lit up like sunrise. Mom, look what Talia got me. He lifted the console out like it was a newborn child. I heard the words, but what I felt was the shift, quick, invisible, dangerous. Approval wrapped in generosity. Love presented as provision. Emotional need disguised as reward. That's nice, I said slowly. But Evan, we talked about. He cut me off without malice, just excitement. She said you have enough to worry about. She wanted to take the pressure off you. Pressure, not partnership, not shared parenting. Pressure. Victor hovered behind him, guilt written all over his face. Talia had sent the gift through him, not brave enough to bring it herself. Elaine, he started, rubbing the back of his neck. I didn't know she was going to buy something that expensive. She went ahead before I could say anything. My jaw tightened. Did you tell her I already said no? He hesitated, a beat too long. I mentioned it. Mentioned, not insisted. Not protected, not stood firm. He exhaled deeply. Look, she meant well. Don't make this a big thing. It wasn't a big thing yet, but it was a seed. And some seeds, once planted, grow fast in wounded soil. That night, Evan played his new game with a joy I never wanted to take from him. But every time he laughed, something in me tightened, not resentment, not jealousy, just the quiet dread of knowing dependency can shift direction without warning. I didn't bring it up again. I kept the peace. I watched, and slowly I saw the shift Victor pretended not to see. Evan offering Talia small pieces of trust he no longer reserved for me. Not rejection, just redistribution. The kind that stings without bleeding. Hours after remembering that moment, I found myself standing in front of my bedroom mirror. The lamp behind me cast a warm halo, but the reflection staring back felt older, quieter, carved by years of holding things steady for a child who didn't realize how much steadiness cost. I opened the nightstand drawer again. The metal box sat exactly where I left it, cool and patient. I lifted it out, feeling the weight settle into my palms. When I unlocked it, the papers inside caught the light, crisp, official, untouched for years. I spread them out across the bed. They weren't sentimental. They weren't emotional. They were structural. Anchors. Safeguards. Quiet power waiting to be used only if absolutely necessary. And for years, I had prayed that moment would never come. My fingers hovered over the top page, tracing the edges. The house felt too silent, the kind of silence that knows something is shifting but doesn't dare name it yet. I closed my eyes, exhaled deeply, and whispered into the dim room, not for God to hear, not for myself, just for the truth. I prayed I'd never need these. The night settled around the house like a curtain drawn too slowly, the kind that doesn't block anything, just softens the edges of a day you'd rather forget. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't play music. I didn't even open a book. I just sat on the couch with my hands folded in my lap, the lamp casting a soft glow over the untouched throw pillows. Humiliation has a way of echoing long after the moment ends. Not loudly, never loudly, but in small pulses under the skin. The words Evan said at the gathering weren't ringing anymore, but the silence that followed them had carved its own space inside me. I wasn't angry. Anger burns. This was something colder, something that settles, something that decides. My phone buzzed on the cushion beside me. Victor's name flashed across the screen. I stared at it for a moment before answering. "Hey," he said, voice warm, casual, unaware. "I just pulled into the driveway a few minutes ago. Sorry I missed the first half of the gathering. How did everything go?" Everything in me went still. He didn't know. He hadn't seen. He arrived, smiling, greeting everyone, thinking the tension in the room was just a long day. He had no idea that while he was parking the car, his son, was dismantling something I spent years holding together. It was fine, I said quietly. Not a lie, not the truth, just enough to hold the conversation where it belonged. He kept talking, filling the silence I didn't offer. Evan's been trying hard to balance everyone these days. I'm glad he wanted to bring both sides together. Maybe it's a sign things are getting easier for him. I let his words settle without embracing them. Victor always saw what he wanted to see. It was how he survived the guilt he never dealt with. "That's good," I murmured. We spoke for another minute. Nothing heavy, nothing memorable. When the call ended, the room felt even quieter. Later, my phone buzzed again. A text from Evan. "Thanks for coming today. I know it meant a lot to Dad and Talia. Dad and Talia. Not him. Not us. Not the family that carried him through every break he didn't know how to name." I stared at those words, feeling the distance between a stretch like a slow tear through fabric. He didn't mean harm. He didn't know the harm. That was always the hardest part, loving someone who doesn't recognize the wound they're making until it's already bleeding. I set the phone face down. I didn't respond. Instead, I rose from the couch and walked toward my bedroom. Each step felt like a quiet decision, a thread pulling me toward something I couldn't avoid any longer. The house was dim, shadows stretching across the hallway like witnesses. When I reached the nightstand, I didn't hesitate. I opened the drawer, lifted the metal box, and placed it gently on the bed. The documents inside waited with a calm I envied. I sat down, exhaled, let the weight of the day settle into my bones. For years, I held these papers as a safety net, not for myself, but for him. A quiet structure built in the background of his life, so he'd never fall farther than I could reach. Every choice, every sacrifice, every late-night form and early morning meeting, all of it woven into protections he didn't even know existed. But safety nets turn into entitlements when someone forgets who built them. Tonight wasn't about punishment. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about hurt. It was about clarity. I lifted the pen, held it steady, and pressed it to the first line. The ink flowed smoothly, unbroken, committing me to a choice I'd delayed for far too long. One signature, then another, then the last. When I placed the pen down, the room felt different, lighter, maybe, or simply honest. I looked at the papers spread before me and whispered the truth I'd been circling all night. I stopped waiting. The morning light spilled across my kitchen table, too bright for the heaviness sitting in my chest. The documents I'd signed the night before lay stacked neatly inside their envelope, resting beside my coffee mug, as if they were just another piece of mail, nothing special, nothing life-altering. But the air felt different, still, prepared. Before I sealed anything, before I let consequence turn into action, I needed to look back, not for softness, not for regret, but to understand the weight of what I'd carried for so long. Because Evan didn't become who he was overnight. Neither did I. I remembered the first school he didn't get into. He was 9, hopeful, nervous, gripping my hand outside the admissions office. The school said they were at capacity, but I knew what that phrase really meant. They saw a boy with a single mother, a family in transition, a story they didn't want to accommodate. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I went home and wrote emails to 3 board members, followed up with phone calls, and showed up in person with a folder of his work, speaking with the kind of calm persistence no one prepares you for. He was accepted 2 weeks later. Evan thought it just worked out. I let him believe that. Another memory rose. The summer he turned 13. He wanted to join a youth program connected to a prestigious mentorship network. The wait list was impossible. Spots filled months in advance. He cried quietly in his room the day the rejection email came in, his shoulders tightening the way they always did when disappointment hit too close to his heart. I didn't tell him I stayed up until 2 a.m. drafting letters. I didn't tell him I met the program director in a coffee shop on my lunch break. I didn't tell him I promised to volunteer on weekends if they gave him a chance. He got a spot. He smiled for days. He never knew why they made an exception. Then there were the job references, the ones I wrote for him during his senior year of high school, each one tailored like a piece of fabric I refused to let unravel. Teachers praised him, but it was my late-night editing and calls to department heads that placed him in positions he thought he earned alone. A mother's fingerprints don't fade, not even when the child forgets who left the prints. But the biggest memory, the one I only let myself revisit rarely, pushed its way forward now. I was offered a promotion once, years ago, a role that would have doubled my salary and opened doors I'd quietly dreamed of walking through. But it also came with late nights and weekend travel. Evan was in a fragile place then. His anxiety came in waves, his fear of abandonment resurfacing in ways he couldn't hide. I knew that if I took that job, I'd miss moments he needed someone to witness. So I declined, quietly, without telling him, without telling anyone. He never knew what it cost. And maybe that was my mistake, covering every crack so smoothly He never saw the ground beneath him. Carrying him so steadily, he never learned what standing alone felt like. The memories didn't make me falter. They clarified everything. My love had been scaffolding, not a leash, never a chain, but scaffolding that held him upright when the world around him shifted. Now it was time to step back and let him see what was holding him up. I picked up the envelope, ran my thumb across the sealed edge, and let the quiet truth settle in the room. I wasn't pulling away. I was releasing what had never been mine to hold forever. I slipped on my shoes, grabbed my keys, and walked outside. The morning air was crisp, almost cleansing. At the mailbox, I held the envelope for a beat, not hesitating, just acknowledging its weight one last time. Then I slid it inside and closed the metal door. The sound was soft, almost gentle. The choice was not. The envelope reached him faster than I expected. Maybe because the post office was only 2 streets away. Maybe because life has a way of delivering consequences exactly when you're least prepared to face them. I wasn't with him when he opened it, but I knew the rhythm of how that morning unfolded. I've known my son's patterns all his life, his silence, his breaths, the way his shoulders react before his voice ever does. He found it on the kitchen counter, wedged between a bowl he never washed and a set of keys he misplaces daily. The envelope was plain. No warning, no hint, just his name in my handwriting, the same handwriting he used to trace with crayons when he was little. He probably smiled at first, probably expected a note, a memory, a soft thing only a mother knows how to give. Instead, he felt the thickness. Instead, he tore it open. Instead, the world shifted. I imagine he started with confusion, his eyes scanning the first page, reading each line too quickly. He would have blinked hard, thinking he misunderstood. But the thing about official documents is they are painfully clear. The first page revoked my academic sponsorship endorsements. The second cut ties with the housing guarantee he never realized would expire without me. The third withdrew my name from the internship's character verification file. The fourth removed my co-signatures from accounts and permissions he relied on without knowing where the backbone came from. And the last page, the one that always lands the hardest, released me from every letter of recommendation I'd ever placed on his behalf. It wasn't punishment. It wasn't revenge. It was a door closing because he'd pushed it too many times without seeing who stood behind it. His breath must have gone still. I could see it without being there, the way he grips the edge of a counter when life knocks the wind out of him, the way his mouth falls open, not to speak, but to understand. Talia walked into the kitchen while he was still reading. She didn't say his name with concern. She said it like she was already annoyed. "What now, Evan?" He handed her the papers, his hands shaking, voice too thin to hide the crack forming beneath it. She flipped through them fast, like she expected to find an error. When she didn't, her expression didn't soften. It soured. "This is dramatic," she murmured. "Your mother's always been emotional. Not one question asking if he was okay. Not one moment spent trying to steady him. Not 1 ounce of the tenderness she performs in public." She placed the papers back on the counter with a sharp tap. "You'll figure it out," she said, brushing past him. "You're not a child." But she didn't look back at him, not even once. That was the first moment he realized she loved the version of him that didn't need anything, the version she could shape, the version that made her look good, not the one who was falling apart. He stood there for a long time, pages spread out in front of him like pieces of a truth he hadn't wanted to see, his reflection staring back from the microwave door. Eyes wide, chest rising too fast, shoulders trembling with the weight of suddenly understanding how much he had leaned on me without noticing the support holding him upright. He reached for his phone. I was in my living room when it rang. The screen lit up with his name. The sound cut through the air like a blade. I watched it vibrate across the coffee table, ringing, then ringing again, then stillness. I didn't pick it up, not out of spite, not out of victory, but because some lessons don't land until silence makes room for them. And that silence was the only thing I had left to give him. I didn't need to be in Evan's apartment to know the day unraveled faster than he could catch it. The silence after he called told me enough. Silence is a language between mothers and sons. You can hear panic even when no words cross the line. By mid-morning, his phone must have lit up with the first call. His internship supervisor was the type who used formal greetings even when delivering bad news. I imagine the conversation the same way I'd heard 100 times from students I mentored. Evan, we received an alert regarding your sponsorship documentation. Can you come in this afternoon so we can discuss? Discuss. That word always means something has shifted. Before he could steady himself, the second call came, his academic advisor. Not warm, not patient, just professional urgency. We need updated guarantor files within 72 hours. Without them, your enrollment status may be affected. He probably sat there, staring at the screen, heart pounding in that sharp, breathless rhythm he gets when he feels the ground opening beneath him. The apartment would have felt smaller, too bright, too loud in its stillness. Then came the email from his leasing office. Short, cold. Please provide updated cosigner verification by Friday. 3 blows. One morning. The support he never saw was disappearing in real time. I could picture him pacing, rubbing the back of his neck, a nervous habit he developed at 15. The papers I'd sent lying scattered across his kitchen counter like broken pieces of a safety net he assumed was permanent. By noon, he must have grabbed his keys and driven to Victor's house. That was the next place he'd go when panic turned to desperation. Not out of closeness. No, that bond had thinned years ago, but out of habit. Evan always ran to whichever parent he believed would fix something without asking too many questions. Victor opened the door with the same gentle confusion he always wore when life demanded more clarity than he had. "What's going on?" he would have asked, stepping aside as Evan rushed in. Evan didn't explain right away. He never could. He folded the documents in his hands, trying to smooth out the creases his panic had created, then handed them to his father. Victor read them slowly, line by line, face tightening more with each sentence. "Your mother withdrew all of this?" he asked, struggling to understand what all of this even meant. Evan's voice cracked. "Dad, please, just talk to her. Tell her I need time. Tell her I'm trying." Victor exhaled sharply, the kind of sigh he only used when life gave him more responsibility than he'd prepared for. But before he could answer, footsteps clicked into the room. Talia, her presence always floated in before her voice did. She crossed her arms lightly, leaning against the doorway with the kind of poise she wore like jewelry. "What's going on now?" she asked, tone dipped in annoyance, not concern. Victor handed her the papers. She skimmed them quickly, too quickly to absorb their depth, but long enough to form an opinion she would deliver with certainty. "This is dramatic," she said calmly. "I don't know why Elaine always escalates things." Victor cut her a look, confused, torn, but Talia stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to make it sound intimate. "He's grown, Victor. He needs to handle his own responsibilities. Running to his mother every time something gets hard isn't healthy." Evan straightened. The pain in his eyes wasn't from the documents anymore. It was from her. The first sting of realizing the hand he reached for wasn't reaching back. "I'm not running," he muttered, voice tight. "I'm just overwhelmed." Talia shrugged, stepping away. "Everyone gets overwhelmed." Victor rubbed his forehead, caught between logic and loyalty. "I'll talk to her," he said finally. "Let me understand what happened first." Talia didn't argue. She didn't need to. Her silence said enough. Evan gathered his papers, hands shaking. Maybe he thought he was walking out quietly. Maybe he hoped she didn't hear the breath he released, a sound twisted between betrayal and disbelief. But as he reached the front door, he heard her behind him. Her voice, soft, dismissive, unmasked. "He was never my responsibility." There's a silence a mother can feel even when she's nowhere near it. A shift in her child's spirit that reaches her before their words ever do. I felt it that evening, something tightening in the air around me, as if the cord connecting us had jerked under sudden weight. I didn't know what happened yet, but I knew something in Evan had cracked in a way no document could have caused by itself. Later he would tell me pieces, not to justify himself, not to seek comfort, but because some wounds speak on their own. And even before he shared a word, I sensed the tremor in the truth. Talia's mask had finally slipped. It happened after he left Victor's house. Hurt, confused, still clutching the pages that reshaped his world. He drove around for nearly an hour, not ready to go home, not ready to sit with himself. When he finally returned, the house was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet people use when they're speaking freely behind closed doors. Evan went to his room. The walls weren't thick, and Talia had never learned how to lower her voice when she was comfortable. He wasn't trying to listen. He just happened to freeze halfway through taking off his jacket when he heard her laugh, a light, dismissive sound he'd never heard pointed in his direction before. "She's really done it this time," Talia said. "I mean, who sends grown man paperwork like that?" Another voice, a friend of hers, responded. Maybe he needed it. "You know, Evan, he panics over everything." They laughed. The kind of laugh that bruises. The kind of laugh that shifts loyalty forever. He called Victor practically in tears. Talia continued, mocking the sound. "I swear, if he had thrown himself on the floor, I wouldn't have been surprised." Evan's breath caught. Mocking him was one thing. Mimicking him was another. Talia went on, voice smooth and irritated all at once. "I'm tired of pretending. Honestly, he's not my child. I supported him because it made things easier around here. But look at this mess. Now he wants everyone to fix it for him." The friend hummed in agreement. "You always did like being seen as the perfect stepmom." At that, Talia's tone shifted into something colder, truth wrapped in a thin layer of pride. Being admired is one thing. Being needed is exhausting. Evan felt that line like a blow to the chest. He didn't move, didn't breathe. The jacket hung from his hand as if the fabric itself was holding him upright. In that moment, the pedestal he'd placed her on, the one polished with gratitude and insecurity, finally cracked. A few minutes later, as the conversation died down, his phone buzzed. A message from Malik, his oldest friend. "Bro, you okay? Your dad told me you sounded shaken." Evan typed back vaguely, not ready to share the whole truth. Malik called instead. "Listen," Malik said, voice steady, concerned. "I've known you and Talia for years now. I'm just going to say this, even if you get mad. That woman never wanted to be a mother to you. She liked the praise, the attention. She liked looking good in front of people. But being maternal, that wasn't her. It was the image she liked." Evan didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence held the truth. He finally saw. Malik added softly, "I'm sorry, man. I know that hurts." It did. More than the revoked support. More than the academic fallout. More than finding himself standing on ground that suddenly had no foundation. Pain rearranged itself inside him, settling into clarity. Talia had not loved him. She had shaped him, performed for him, benefited from him. Control had always been her currency. And for the first time since she walked into his life, he saw her clearly, not as the woman who made him feel seen, but as the woman who clung to admiration like oxygen, offering affection only when it kept her reflection polished. In that quiet room, with the faint hum of a house that wasn't his home anymore, Evan realized a truth that would change everything. She never loved him, only the power he gave her. I wasn't expecting a knock that early in the morning. The sun had barely lifted itself over the horizon, the house still resting in that fragile quiet before the day finds its rhythm. When I opened the door, Victor stood on my porch with the same expression he wore years ago when we signed divorce papers, uncertain, apologetic, confused by the weight of something he should have seen sooner. He held his keys like a man unsure whether he should stay or turn around. "Elaine, can we talk?" I stepped aside, not out of warmth, but because running from conversations never saved anyone in this family. We sat at the dining table, the same place we once shared school papers, birthday cakes, and arguments about schedules that felt bigger than they were. Victor looked around like the room remembered him even when he'd forgotten it. He exhaled. "Evan came to me yesterday. He was shaken. He said you pulled every support you've ever given him." His voice wavered. I didn't know what to tell him. I don't understand what happened. I studied him for a moment. He truly didn't know. He hadn't seen the moment his son severed something he believed was unbreakable, and that blindness, the choice to stay unaware, was why we were here now. So I told him, not with theatrics, not with anger, just the truth, one clean line at a time. During the family photo, I said quietly, he told me to step aside so he could take the picture with his real mother. Victor froze. Not a blink, not a breath. I continued, my voice steady. Talia whispered to him to show them who his real family is. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look confused. He looked ready. Victor's hands tightened around his keys until they clicked. His jaw clenched, and I watched realization hit him with the force of a decade of avoiding conflict. He said that. His voice cracked. To you. He did. Victor leaned back, staring at the wall as if the truth was written there, and he just hadn't bothered to look earlier. I saw him replaying things, years of sidestepping, years of staying, neutral, years of letting Talia guide the emotional climate of his home, because confrontation frightened him more than consequence did. You should have told me, he murmured, guilt sinking into his voice. You weren't listening. I replied softly. Not then. Not for a long time. He swallowed hard. Silence stretched between us, not heavy, but necessary. Then he spoke again, voice low, almost trembling. I thought I was keeping peace by staying out of things. I thought if I didn't interfere, everyone would settle naturally. He shook his head slowly. I didn't realize what that silence cost. This was the part one didn't need to say. He already knew it. A child shouldn't be raised in the space between a mother's strength and a father's avoidance. Evan grew into that gap, reaching for whichever voice felt stronger at the moment. And Talia knew how to fill silence better than anyone. Victor pushed a hand through his hair. He wants me to talk to you, to fix this for him. He asked if I could convince you to reinstate everything. I waited. He looked at me with a clarity I haven't seen in years. But after hearing what he did, he whispered, I can't protect him from this. Not this time. Victor stood, pacing once, twice, before stopping at the doorway. His voice steadied, not with anger, but with something heavier. Responsibility finally caught up to him. I'm withdrawing my support too, he said quietly. Financial, academic, all of it, because he needs to feel this. He needs to sit in the truth he created. He turned back toward me, and for the first time in a long while, he looked like the man I used to know, flawed but honest. I'll tell him myself, he said, and I'll tell him exactly why. He reached for the doorknob, paused, and spoke one final line, the clean, painful truth that would shift Evan's world a second time. You must face what you caused. There are collapses people can see, loud, messy, desperate. Then there are the quiet ones, the ones that happen behind closed doors, without witnesses, without sound. Those are the collapses that change a man. And I knew, without anyone telling me, that was the kind Evan had the day Victor told him the truth and withdrew his own support. A mother doesn't need eyes on her child to know when he is folded into himself. The air around me felt heavier that evening, like something fragile had cracked miles away, but echoed straight to my chest. Later he would tell me fragments, stopping and starting as if each memory was something he had to pick up carefully. But even before he shared a word, I could feel the unraveling. When Evan returned to his apartment after leaving Victor's house, he didn't turn on the lights. He stood in the entryway long enough for the darkness to settle around him, holding the envelope of documents like it weighed more than anything he'd ever carried. There was no shouting, no dramatic pacing, no phone thrown, no door slammed. His collapse was quieter than that, almost gentle in how thoroughly it broke him. He sank to the floor beside the couch, knees pulled up, hands pressed against his face. His breath didn't come fast. It came shallow, like he was trying not to feel anything at all. The world around him blurred. The walls, the silence, the pieces of his life he'd taken for granted. He stayed there until the clock in the kitchen clicked into the next hour. Grief didn't hit him first. Recognition did. The kind that burns through pride before it even reaches the heart. At some point, he reached for a blanket from the back of the couch, an old one he'd had since high school, soft at the edges. He wrapped it around himself like a shield, and in that moment, without knowing it, he looked exactly like the 14-year-old boy who once cried into my shoulder, terrified of being forgotten. But this time, it wasn't fear of abandonment. It was the realization that he had abandoned someone else. Eventually, he pulled himself up and walked slowly to the bedroom, as if the weight in his chest was dragging behind him. He opened the drawer of his nightstand, not searching for anything specific, just trying to steady himself with something familiar. That's when he found it. A letter, folded carefully, my handwriting across the front. He sat on the edge of the bed and opened it with trembling fingers. I remembered writing that letter years ago during a season when he was struggling more than he admitted, grades slipping, sleep vanishing, confidence cracking in places he didn't want me to see. I wrote it to remind him of who he was beneath the insecurity that followed him like a shadow. Evan, you are not hard to love. You are not a burden. You are not alone. Even when you feel lost, I see you. Even when you doubt yourself, I believe in you. I will walk with you until you find steady ground again. You are worth every step. Love, Mom. The paper blurred as tears filled his eyes. But he didn't sob. Not loudly. Not painfully. He cried the way grown men cry when they finally understand the difference between being supported and being carried. He folded the letter back, slowly, hands shaking, and pressed it to his chest. He stayed there for a long time, letting the truth sink in without fighting it. Then he reached for his phone, not to call me this time, not to beg, not to defend himself, just to open the Mother's Day photo, the one taken without me. He stared at it with a stillness that wasn't shock anymore. It was honesty settling into the bones. His voice cracked into the quiet room, barely a whisper, but heavy enough to shift the entire story of who he thought he was. I heard the wrong one. There's a particular kind of silence a mother feels when the people who once controlled the noise around her start losing their grip. I felt that silence the next evening, quiet but shifting, like the air itself was preparing for something to fall out of place. Talia had been pacing the length of her living room all morning, curtains half drawn, phone in hand. Even without seeing it, I knew the scene. Women like her never unravel honestly. They unravel theatrically, shaping every gesture as if the world is watching. Word reached me the same way truth always travels. It finds mothers before it finds anyone else. By late afternoon, she had summoned both Evan and Victor to a family meeting. That was how she phrased it. Not with humility, not with concern, but with the confidence of someone who believed authority could be reclaimed if she said the right words in the right tone. Victor arrived first. He walked in with the heaviness of a man caught between exhaustion and awakening. For years, he'd let peace sit in Talia's hands, even when her peace came at someone else's expense. But something in him had shifted since the morning he stood in my kitchen listening to the truth. Talia greeted him with a soft smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We need to talk," she said, sounding rehearsed. He didn't move to sit. Then Evan walked in, shoulders slumped, face still swollen from the quiet collapse he'd had the day before. He didn't hug her, didn't smile. He sat down on the edge of the couch, like he was bracing for another hit. Talia immediately placed a hand on her chest, performative concern. "Evan, sweetheart, I've been so worried. You've been distant. I don't know what your mother said to you, but Victor cut her off for the first time in years." "Talia, don't start." She blinked, taken aback. She wasn't used to being interrupted by him, ever. "I'm trying to help," she insisted, voice tightening. "This situation is out of hand. Elaine is manipulating all of us." Victor took a slow step closer. "You weren't there, Talia. You didn't see what happened on Mother's Day. You didn't hear what you told Evan to say to his own mother." Her eyes flickered, the first hairline crack in her composure. "I didn't tell him anything. He misunderstood." Evan raised his head at that. Misunderstood. The word hung in the air like a lie wearing perfume. "Talia," he said quietly, "I heard you. You said to show them who my real family was." She exhaled sharply. "I was trying to protect you from feeling pulled between two households." Victor shook his head. "No, you were pushing him away from his mother. There's a difference." Her voice sharpened. "Victor, please, don't pretend she hasn't been coddling him all these years." "I'm standing right here," Evan said, his voice splitting in a way that made Victor's chest tighten. "And I'm telling you, you weren't protecting me. You were using me." The room stilled. No one looked away. Not this time. Talia's face hardened. Her final performance began. She clasped her hands together, stepping forward like a woman delivering a closing argument. "Everything that's happening is because Elaine wants control. She always has. She's punishing him. She's punishing us. This is her fault." Victor stared at her with a clarity she had never earned. "No, Talia, this is you. This is every whisper, every manipulation, every time you put your pride above this boy's heart." Evan didn't cry. He didn't shout. He simply stood, steady and done. And in that moment, in the quietest room she ever tried to command, Talia finally spoke a sentence that revealed her completely. "This is Elaine's fault," and nobody believed her. There is a certain kind of evening that tells you something is coming before it arrives. The air felt thicker than usual, the house unusually still. I moved through the rooms quietly, not restless, just aware in the way only a mother becomes aware when her child is wrestling with something too heavy to hold alone. I didn't expect him to come, but I wasn't surprised when he did. What I didn't know until later was how long he sat in his car before he gathered the courage to reach my street. How many times he made that turn, only to circle the block again. How many times he sighed into the darkness, gripping the steering wheel with hands that finally understood loss. He parked across from my house first, just sat there, engine running, head bowed, the kind of posture a man takes when everything familiar in his life has collapsed and he's standing at the door of the only place he once felt safe. But guilt is a heavy gate. It doesn't open with one breath. He stepped out of the car, took 3 slow steps toward my walkway, then stopped, hands trembling, breath uneven, eyes locked on my front door like it was the edge of a cliff. He turned back, got in his car, left. But the road between regret and home has a pull stronger than pride. Minutes later, he returned, parked again. This time he leaned forward, forehead resting on the steering wheel, whispering words he didn't want anyone to hear. He got out again, walked halfway, stopped again. Fear didn't stop him because he worried I'd reject him. Fear stopped him because he didn't believe he deserved to be forgiven. Inside, the house held its own quiet. I was sitting in the living room, lamp casting a warm circle of light over the rug. I wasn't pacing. I wasn't anxious. I was simply present, still enough that if a heart shifted within miles of me, I'd feel the echo. I didn't know he was outside in the dark, but I felt something, a stirring in the space around me, a restlessness that didn't belong to the room, but to the bond between a mother and the child she raised into a man whose choices finally caught up to him. He approached again, slow, cautious. each step heavy with a kind of remorse that rewrites a person from the inside out. He made it all the way to the porch this time, even lifted his hand halfway before dropping it to his side. He turned, took a shaky breath, head down, started to walk away, but then he stopped, stood there in the dim glow of the streetlight, shoulders pulled in, the same way he did the night he cried at 14, quiet, trembling, trying to hold himself together without cracking open again. He whispered something into the night that only he and God heard. Then he walked back toward the porch with a steadiness that wasn't confidence. It was surrender, a man finally acknowledging the weight of everything he'd put on the wrong shoulders. Inside, I felt that shift, felt it as clearly as if someone had placed a hand on my chest. Not fear, not shock, just the soft recognition that a door was about to be tested. Evan raised his hand, hesitated, swallowed hard, and finally he knocked. When I opened the door, Evan stood there like a man returning from a long war he fought mostly with himself. His eyes were swollen, his shoulders pulled tight, his breath caught somewhere between fear and apology. He looked older than he did a week ago, stripped of the confidence he wore like a jacket, and left with nothing but the truth he could no longer avoid. I stepped aside. He walked in slowly. No embrace, no accusations, just a quiet acknowledgement that the world between us had shifted. The living room felt different with him in it, smaller, heavier, as if the air needed time to adjust. I sat on the couch. He stood for a moment, unsure whether he deserved the seat across from me. I nodded toward it. He sat, not at the edge like a visitor, not comfortably like a son. Somewhere in between. We didn't rush into words. Silence has a place in healing, especially when pride has finally evaporated. When he did speak, his voice was low, worn thin. "Mom, I don't even know where to start." "You start," I said gently, "where the truth lives." His hands trembled against each other. He stared down at them the way a child studies something they broke without meaning to. "I hurt you," he whispered, and I didn't see it until everything fell apart. I didn't respond. This wasn't the moment for comfort. It was the moment for honesty. He took a shaky breath. I thought I thought she understood me better. I thought she supported me. I thought she saw potential in me that I didn't see in myself. His throat tightened. I didn't realize she liked being needed more than she liked me. He finally lifted his eyes, and for the first time since he was a teenager, I saw the boy who feared the world more than he admitted. Then he said the words that explained everything, every choice, every drift, every painful moment that led to that photo. "I was scared you'd stop choosing me." The sentence hit the room with a weight I felt in my bones, not because it excused anything, but because it revealed the root of all of it. Evan wasn't driven by malice. He was driven by fear. A fear I tried to soothe years ago, but never fully understood its depth. "I saw you building your life again," he said quietly, "working more, laughing more, being stronger. And part of me thought, if you didn't need me anymore, maybe you wouldn't fight for me anymore." A tear slipped down his cheek. He wiped it fast, embarrassed. So when Talia stepped in, when she praised me, when she told me she believed in me, I clung to it, even when it meant pulling away from you. He shook his head slowly, voice breaking. I didn't notice how far I'd gone until I looked at that Mother's Day photo and realized you weren't there. And I put you outside of it. The memory of that moment still stung, but I didn't flinch. Pain deserves acknowledgement, not dramatics. I let the silence settle before I spoke. You feared I'd stop choosing you, I said softly, but you never asked if I stopped loving you. You assumed distance where there was sacrifice. You assumed neglect where there was guidance. He nodded, eyes flooded with shame. Mom, I'm sorry. I wasn't a woman who needed grand apologies. I didn't need him on his knees. I just needed the truth. And he gave it to me, raw and trembling. But apology alone doesn't rebuild anything. I leaned forward slightly. Evan, I said gently but firmly, love can resume. Trust can rebuild. But there is one thing that cannot be negotiated. He looked up, waiting. Respect must return before anything else. There is a silence that follows truth, a silence so sharp it cuts through every performance, every facade, every carefully crafted illusion. That was the silence surrounding Talia in the days after Evan came to my door. I didn't witness it myself, but I felt the shift the way a mother feels a storm breaking somewhere in the distance. Something in the air around us grew clearer, cleaner, like dust settling after years of simply being stirred. Evan returned to Victor's house not as a boy seeking comfort, but as a man who had finally seen the root of his own undoing. Victor met him at the door. No hesitation, no confusion. This time, he didn't look at his son through the lens of neutrality. He looked at him with accountability and a kind of protection he hadn't managed to summon in years. They spoke for nearly an hour in the living room, and for the first time since the divorce, there was no triangle, no divided loyalties, no invisible tug-of-war. It was a father and son confronting the truth of a home that had been shaped too long by one woman's need for control. When Talia walked in, the energy in the room shifted, just not the way she expected. She entered with her usual composure, shoulders squared, tone soft enough to seem caring but crisp enough to command attention. She paused in the doorway, reading the room the way someone reads a script they think they've memorized. "What's going on?" she asked, voice dipped in concern she hadn't earned. Neither man answered immediately. Victor's posture didn't change. Evan's eyes didn't soften. And that silence, the one she'd never had to stand in before, was the first thing that unsettled her. She stepped closer. "Evan, honey, did something happen? You left so suddenly last night. I've been worried." He didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, but clarity. She tried again, this time a different tactic. "Sweetheart, look at me. You know I care about you. We can fix whatever your mother stirred up. Just tell me what." Victor cut in before she could finish. "Talia, stop." The words froze her mid-step. Victor rarely told anyone to stop, especially her. She blinked, thrown off balance in a way no one had ever witnessed from her. Evan finally spoke, voice steady, stripped of fear. "I heard what you said about me." Her mask slipped for just a second. Not broken, just dented. "What do you mean?" she asked. "You said I was never your responsibility," he replied. "You mocked me when I was hurting, and you blamed Mom for everything you helped create." Her lips parted, eyes widening in the way people do when truth hits them before they can prepare a lie. "Evan, that's not fair," she said, reaching out. "You misunderstood. I was frustrated. I didn't mean—" "You meant every word," he said softly. She took in a sharp breath. "Victor, are you going to let him talk to me this way?" Victor didn't move. His silence answered her more loudly than any defense ever could. She tried again, voice trembling with urgency this time. I have been here for him. I have supported him. I have been the one keeping this house together. No, Victor said quietly. You kept the performance together. She stepped back as if pushed. Evan stood, his voice calm but final. You wanted admiration. You wanted credit. You wanted control. You never wanted me. She shook her head frantically. That's not true. Evan, I made mistakes, but I was trying. No, he repeated, and his voice didn't break. I see you clearly now. Her breathing quickened. The room that once belonged fully to her, emotionally, politically, strategically, had shifted. Her influence slipped from her hands like sand she could no longer grasp. She looked between them, eyes pleading for the loyalty she'd always taken for granted. But neither man shifted in her direction. Neither softened. Neither stepped forward. And in that still, devastating moment, she understood. Her words held no weight here anymore. Her presence commanded nothing. Her story moved no one. She looked at them both, father and son standing where she once stood alone, and the truth carved itself into her face. She realizes her influence is gone. The gathering wasn't meant to be grand. It wasn't even meant to be a reconciliation. It was just a simple family cookout Victor's sister hosted every early summer, plastic tables draped in bright cloth, children running through sprinklers, music drifting from a speaker propped against a cooler. I almost didn't go, not out of spite, but because peace had settled so deeply in me these past days. I didn't want to disturb it. But something nudged me forward, steady, gentle. So I came. I arrived quietly, carrying a bowl of fruit the way women do when they've learned to walk into rooms without announcing themselves. A few heads turned as I stepped through the backyard gate. Some nodded. Some offered small, warm smiles. Nobody knew the details, but families sense a shift long before the story reaches them. I moved through the space with the calm of someone who survived a storm and put her house back in order herself. Then I saw him. Evan was standing near the grill, talking to one of the cousins, shoulders relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in months. When he spotted me, something stilled inside him. Not fear, not awkwardness, something closer to reverence. He handed the tongs to someone else and walked toward me slowly, like each step was a promise he didn't want to rush. He stopped a foot away from me. For a moment, we just stood there, surrounded by laughter and clinking plates and sunlight catching in the leaves above us. Then he spoke, steady, clear, no script, no performance. "Mom," he said, "I'm glad you're here." A few people nearby turned. Conversations dipped. Something soft rippled across the backyard. Not drama, not spectacle, just awareness. I didn't reach for him. I didn't make it cinematic. I simply nodded and let the moment be honest. He took a breath, gathering what he needed to say next. "I haven't honored you the way I should have. I didn't see what you carried for me. I didn't see who you were to me." His throat tightened, but he didn't look away. "But I see it now, and I need you to know you're my mother, my real mother." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't perform. He just told the truth in a room where truth had been overdue. A quiet ripple moved through the gathering. Not applause, not murmurs, just a collective shift, people straightening, acknowledging, understanding. It was the kind of moment that restores the spine without hardening the heart. Victor stepped forward then. He'd been standing a short distance away, his expression tight, with something like humility. When he reached me, he removed his cap and held it in his hand, a gesture I'd only seen from him in church or at funerals, never toward me. "Elaine," he said, voice thick but clear, "I owe you an apology, a real one." He swallowed hard, for not seeing, for not listening, for letting things happen in my house that should never have touched our son. The backyard quieted again, but gently, as if the air wanted to witness this without intruding. "I failed you," he said simply, "and I'm sorry. I didn't absolve him. That wasn't my work to do, but I heard him, and I let the weight of the words settle where they belonged, not on my shoulders anymore, but on the truth he should have carried long before today." Evan stepped beside me, not touching, just standing close enough that the space between us felt whole again. Someone called everyone toward the tables for food, and conversations slowly resumed. Children laughed. Music rose again. The world didn't stop for this moment. It honored it by folding it gently into the day. I stepped away for a moment, letting the sunlight warm my face. The gate behind me clicked softly as a breeze lifted it, brushing the air with a whisper. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindictive. I felt whole. My silence had done what shouting never could. It broke what needed breaking. It revealed what needed revealing. It rebuilt everything on truth instead of tension. I walked into the sunlight, steady and restored, carrying nothing but myself. And that was enough.